shoulder width. Shoulder width is one of the physical advantages in bodybuilding that cannot be built from zero through training. And this is not about the size of the deltoid muscles. It is about the width between the clavicle and the acromion process, the bone structure the shoulder sits on. When that distance is wide, the deltoid spreads outward from a broader base. And no matter what anyone says, the V-taper is visible even from the other side of the gym. The bad news is that the deltoid can be fully developed and still stay inside the hip line, which means it will never look as wide from the front. I bet everyone has heard of Frank Zane, who won 3 Mr. Olympia titles from 1977 to 1979. At a competitive weight of roughly 185 pounds, he regularly placed above men who outweighed him by 30 to 40 pounds. And that's only because of his shoulder bone structure that was wide enough to create a V-taper in every pose. And of course, his competitors on stage couldn't replicate it even if their deltoid muscles were far more developed. As you already see, a narrower clavicle structure completely changes the entire front view. A bodybuilder can develop exceptional deltoids and still look wide from the side. But from the front, he cannot create the same V-taper. This is exactly what Frank Zane proved for 3 years in a row. He weighed only 185 pounds and beat men who weighed 230. The waist. The waist is the place where bodybuilding genetics become visible before judges even start evaluating a single abdominal muscle. People usually blame conditioning, vacuum control, or even abdominal development. But the real limitation starts with the skeleton underneath the midsection. Here everything comes down to 2 variables: to the iliac crest and to the lower edge of the rib cage and the space between them. When the iliac crest is narrow and the rib cage angles down tightly, the waist keeps its narrow look, even when the upper body grows. That is why some bodybuilders can add size to the lats, chest, and shoulders without losing the illusion of a tight middle. Chris Bumstead is the clearest modern example. He won 5 consecutive Classic Physique Olympia titles from 2019 to 2023. Even at his heaviest off-season weight, his waist still looks narrow because the ribcage and pelvis leave him with a natural taper. And vacuum training and posing at home in front of the mirror is what helps him control it however he wants. And this is exactly why 2 competitors can reach the same level of conditioning and still look completely different from the front. In one, the waist collapses inward under the lats. In the other, it stays wide no matter how sharply the abs show. The limb length. 2 athletes can use the same program, the same squat rack, and the same intensity, but the exercise will not feel the same. Here, everything depends on the length of the femur, the torso, and the arms. When the femur is shorter, the torso can stay more upright during a squat, the movement becomes less hip dominant and more quad dominant, and the thighs get a cleaner range of motion through the part of the lift that actually matters for bodybuilding. And the same thing happens in the upper body. Shorter arms shorten the bar path in the bench press, reduce the amount of mechanical work in every rep, and give the chest a better leverage position over years of training. Tom Platz placed 3rd at the 1981 Mr. Olympia, but his legs became more famous than the legs of most men who actually won the show. His femur to torso ratio allowed him to squat deep while keeping the movement brutally quad dominant. His structure allowed him to reach positions that longer limbed athletes had to fight from the first rep. That is why a long femur athlete can train hard and still never make the squat look the same. Fiber type. Fiber type is one of the reasons why 2 bodybuilders can train for the same number of years and still grow at completely different speeds. The point is that some muscles are built with more endurance fibers, while others are built with more fibers that respond hard to heavy mechanical tension. Skeletal muscle mainly comes down to 2 categories: type 1 fibers that are slow twitch fibers and more endurance dominant, fatigue resistant, and limited in how much size they can add. And the fast twitch fibers, called type 2 fibers, they're able to produce more force but fatigue faster and have a much higher hypertrophy ceiling. Dorian Yates is the best example here. He won 6 Mr. Olympia titles from 1992 to 1997 while training with a volume approach that many competitors considered too low. He usually did only 1 to 2 hardworking sets per exercise, which is why his sessions often lasted under an hour. His body didn't need endless volume to trigger growth because his muscle fiber composition responded brutally hard to the work he gave it. The myostatin. Myostatin is the protein the body uses to put limits on muscle growth. And this protein is produced in every human body. It binds to receptors in muscle tissue and tells the body when enough growth is enough. So in simple words, it works like a built-in brake. And if someone is born with lower myostatin expression, that brake doesn't hit at the same point as everyone else. Relly Winklar is one of the clearest examples of this. At the 2018 Mr. Olympia, he competed at roughly 270 pounds while standing only 5 feet 7 inches tall. He placed 3rd, but the amount of dense muscle mass he carried at that height made many people see him as one of the most genetically gifted bodybuilders in the sport. This is why myostatin is so important. In most people, the body starts putting limits on further growth fairly quickly, even when training, nutrition, sleep, and recovery are already maximally optimized. but in people with lower myostatin activity, that stop signal comes later. Skin thickness. Skin thickness is the reason conditioning doesn't always look like real conditioning. A bodybuilder can be lean enough on paper, dry enough on stage, and still not show the same level of detail as an athlete with thinner skin. The layer that matters here is the dermis. It sits between the surface of the muscle and what the judges actually see. When this layer is thinner, striations, cross striations, and small muscle fiber details can appear earlier. But when the dermis is thicker, it creates a visual filter over the muscle. With Flex Wheeler, this was visible every time he stepped under stage lights. He won 4 Arnold Classic titles between 1993 and 1997, and in contest shape, he carried a level of muscle detail and surface separation that many judges from that era described as one of the best they had ever seen. His body fat was usually around 3 to 4%, but his skin structure made the detail look sharper than competitors, who may have been even leaner on paper. Joint size. Joint size is one of the most underrated genetic advantages in bodybuilding because it can really change how big the muscle looks before the measurement even changes. Most people look at arm size, calf size, or shoulder size, but the eye also compares the muscle to the frame sitting around it. Here the mechanism is pretty simple, and it's a visual contrast. When the wrist and ankle bones are smaller, they create a narrow point at the end of the limb. And because of that, the muscle above the joint looks like it expands outward more. The same arm measurement can look bigger on a smaller wrist than on a wider one. And yeah, Steve Reeves is the classic example here. He won Mr. Universe in 1950, and his physique became one of the main references for classical bodybuilding proportions. His wrists and ankles were unusually small, which made every muscle group above those joints look more dramatic. At roughly 215 pounds, his arms could read larger than the arms of competitors who outweighed him. And that's all because the joints made the mass look like it was flaring out from a smaller base. And this is why a thicker jointed athlete can build serious muscle and still look blocky from every angle. So the main point here is that muscle looks bigger when the structure around it gives the eye something smaller to compare it against. Androgen receptor density. Androgen receptor density is where testosterone stops being just a number on blood work. Because the real question is not only how much testosterone the body has, the real question is how strongly the muscle tissue can respond to it. Testosterone doesn't build muscle by floating around in the blood. It has to bind to androgen receptors inside muscle cells first. And when a muscle cell has more receptors, or receptors that are more sensitive to the signal, the same testosterone level can create a stronger anabolic response. With Dorian Yates, this is one of the reasons his response looked so unusual. He trained with a low volume approach that many competitors from his era thought wasn't enough. But his body kept adding dense muscle at a level that changed the entire standard of the 1990s. The point is not that his program was magic. The point is that his muscle tissue seemed able to turn the same hormonal signal into a much stronger growth response. And this is where many people misunderstand hormone use. Pushing the signal higher does not guarantee the same result if the receiving system is weaker. An athlete can use more and still build less because the muscle does not convert the signal with the same efficiency. But at the same time, the blood work can look impressive while the actual muscle response stays ordinary. That is why androgen receptor density matters so much. It decides how much of the hormone signal actually becomes new tissue, and that part starts inside the muscle cell before the first set even begins.